can hear everything you say. Just kidding. 3.3, completing the square. So, can you please, this should be review, expand each of the following. So remember, if you have a squared binomial, you have to write it twice because it's multiplied by itself. X plus 1 times x plus 1. You might have learned FOIL, the first, the outsides, the insides, and last, or you might have learned distributive law. So the first term in the first binomial times the second binomial plus the second term in the first binomial multiplied by that second binomial. Okay, and then expand. So expand all three of these. If you learned FOIL, you might find that a lot simpler. So FOIL, we multiply the first, we multiply the outsides, then the insides, and then the last two. Here you'd have x minus 2 times x minus 2, x squared minus 2x plus 4, or x squared minus 4x plus 4. So notice you're doubling negative 2 gives you the middle term. Squaring negative 2 gives you the last term. So the very last guy, x plus 3 times x plus 3 equals x squared. What would be the middle term then? 6, because you're having 3x plus 3x. We double that. And what's the last term? It would be 3 squared, because it's 3 times 3, which is 9. Okay? So there is a pattern when we have perfect squares, right? That x plus 3, we have this as x plus b squared. This b would be just doubled to get our middle term, and it would be squared to get the last term. So if we use that knowledge, let's go and complete these squares. So let's work a little bit backwards. If you know that just the middle term was doubled, what was this? X plus what? It would have been x plus 3 if we want to make a perfect square, because it was doubled. So what does the last term have to be to make it a perfect square? 9. 3 squared is 9. 3 squared. So divide it by 2 and square it. The next guy, what would it have to be a perfect square? Divided by 2. Divided by 2 gives you minus 4. It would have to be x minus 4 times x minus 4, giving you the last term as what? 16. So divide it by 2 and square it. So your middle term, divide by 2 and squared, will give you the last term. The middle term, divide by 2 and squared equals the last term in a perfect square. So that for a perfect square. X squared plus bx plus c. So what would be the last term for 6? Divide by 2, which is 7. 7 squared is 49. And then that would factor to x plus 7 squared. Okay, so we're going to use that to convert from standard form to vertex form, and that's called completing the square. I'm going to practice that today. We're going to spend 2 days on that. Today, we're going to practice if our a is 1. Okay? And the equation y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So if a is 1. There is a typo here. This should say minus 8. Write y equals x squared minus 8x plus 7 in the form ax minus p squared plus q. So we want to create a perfect square. That's our goal. So our first step is to separate the terms with x. So we're going to put if we start with y equals x squared minus 8x plus 7, our first step is we're going to isolate these terms with x. We're going to put them in brackets. And we're going to create a perfect square. So with this idea that b will be my middle term, negative 8 is the middle term. How do we get that number? We divide it by 2 and square it. So 16. But can you just add 16 into an equation? No. So you also need to subtract 16 to keep equality. You can't just add a number in an equation and it won't be the same as what you previously had. So if we add 16, we need to subtract 16 so it's equal to the previous statement. Okay? Are those two equations here still the same thing? Yeah, they are. Because what's 16 minus 16? 0. Okay? Now our next step is, well, we want a perfect square, so we just need this part. That's a perfect square. How do I get rid of negative 16? We're going to move it outside the brackets. No big deal. Collect our like terms. And now we can write our perfect square in factored form. And that becomes their middle term divided by 2. X minus 4 squared minus 9. Okay, so once it's in that form, what would be the vertex? 4 and negative 9. Parabola will open up. Positive a value, it's positive 1. The minimum is at negative 9 when x equals 4. Okay, so all we have to do today is the next page. We're just going to practice completing the square, and then you're going to practice with your homework. Okay? So first step, let's separate the terms with the variable x in brackets. Okay, we're going to separate those. And I'm going to put some space here, because we want to create a perfect square. So how do we figure out that middle term to make it a perfect square? We take our b value and do what? Divide by 2 and square it. So to figure out that, 6 divided by 2 squared, what does that equal? 9. So I'm going to add 9, but you can't just add 9. So what are we going to have to do? Subtract 9. Good. Next step. We want to group the perfect square together, so we only need the x squared plus 6x plus 9. Where is the minus 9 going to go? Outside the bracket. Now, fast forward to tomorrow's lesson a little bit. If there was a number, like an a value here, to bring it outside, you'd have to multiply it by a. But there's no a. That's a little fast forward to tomorrow. So right now, all we have to do is write minus 9 outside the brackets. And plus 8 is still there. Yeah? Yeah, you always bring the negative, because whenever you square, like we always want the positive inside, because for a perfect square, even if it was like negative 3 times negative 3, that last term would become positive, because 2 negatives is a positive. Or if it was 2 positives, it also would be positive. So with the perfect square, we always bring the negative outside. So that's why we write the plus first and then the minus. Easy? Okay, we have x squared plus 6x plus 9. What's negative 9 plus 8? Negative 1. Can you write now this in factored form? What would it be? X plus 3. It's the middle term divided by 2. 6 over 2. Gives you that middle term of 3. Easy? Hopefully. It gets easier with practice, and we're going to spend 2 days practicing this, okay? So first step, separate the middle term. Leave some space. Okay, so to make this a perfect square, take the b value, negative 12, divide by 2 and square it. What does that give you? Negative 6 squared is positive 36. You can't just add 36, so we need to subtract it. Okay, so who do we have to bring out? Get rid of or move outside? The minus 36. That's now a perfect square trinomial. So bring the negative 36 out. Okay, we can do this last step all in one spot, like one go. So the first guy, to factor that perfect square, what does he become? X plus 6 or minus 6? Take the sign of the middle. In order to get that middle term as a negative, it had to be minus 6. Right, to get the middle term, we double the minus 6, which gives you negative 12. Square the negative 6 gives you the plus 36. And what's negative 36 plus 13? Negative 23. So what's your vertex in this one? 6 and negative 23. Right? Now it's easy to graph. Vertex form is much more useful. Do you want to try example 3? Short lesson, I know, isn't that wonderful? Okay, try example 3 on your own. All right. So you separated x squared and the 3x. To make it a perfect square, you had to divide it by the middle term, the 3, by 2, and square it, which gives you 9 over 4. You add 9 over 4, you have to subtract 9 over 4. So that gives us x squared plus 3x plus 9 over 4. We need to move the minus 9 over 4 outside the brackets. Always the minus moves outside. And simplifying this, x plus 3x plus 9 over 4. In factored form, it's 3 over 2. X plus 3 over 2. We take the sign of the middle term. And negative 9 over 4 plus 5 gives us 20 negative, so 11 over 4? Plus 11 over 4. So you should have your vertex at negative 3 over 2, comma 11 over 4. Remember, opposite sign for the x. Not so bad? Did you finish 4? No? Okay, finish off 4, give it a try. Catch up. The second one, separating the first two. Try not to skip too many steps, okay? Because then you'll make silly mistakes. To get the perfect square, we take the middle term negative 5, divide it by 2, and square it. which gives you positive 25 over 4. You can't just add 25 over 4, you also have to subtract it. Okay? To make a perfect square, we need only 3 terms, and we need the positive 25 over 4. So we move minus 25 over 4 outside the brackets. Okay, so when we turn this to factored form here, this guy as a perfect square, what does he become? X minus, it's our middle term divided by 2. We keep the sign of the middle term as well. So negative 5 divided by 2 is negative 5 over 2. And what's negative 24 minus 4? It's negative 25 over 4 minus 16 over 4, which gives you 41 minus 41 over 4. Okay, what's my vertex then? Negative or positive 5 over 2? Positive 5 over 2 and negative 41 over 4. Okay, because the equation for vertex form is x minus p squared plus q, so the p would be positive 5 over 2. Okay, so positive 5 over 2, negative 41 over 4. That's it for today. That's our lesson. Yay! Okay, what's the homework? Don't get too excited now. Your homework is page 192 to 197, numbers 1A. Oh, no, correction. Numbers 1, 2, 6A, 7A, 8A, and 12A. Okay?